We now look at some of the Docker commands. At the end of this lecture, you will go through a hands-on quiz where you will practice working with these commands. Let's start by looking at docker run command. The docker run command is used to run a container from an image. Running the docker run nginx command will run an instance of the nginx application on the Docker host if it already exists. If the image is not present on the host, it will go out to Docker Hub and pull the image down. But this is only done the first time. For the subsequent executions, the same image will be reused. The docker ps command lists all running containers and some basic information about them, such as the container ID, the name of the image we use to run the containers, the current status, and the name of the container. Each container automatically gets a random ID and name created for it by Docker, which in this case is silly Samet. To see all containers running or not, use the -a option. This outputs all running as well as previously stopped or exited containers. We'll talk about the command and port fields shown in this output later in this course. For now, let's just focus on the basic commands. To stop a running container, use the docker stop command, but you must provide either the container ID or the container name in the stop command. If you're not sure of the name, run the docker ps command to get it. On success, you will see the name printed out, and running docker ps again will show no running containers. Running docker ps-a, however, shows the container silly Samet and that it is in an exited state a few seconds ago. Now, what if we don't want this container lying around consuming space? What if we want to get rid of it for good? Use the docker rm command to remove a stopped or exited container permanently. If it prints the name back, we're good. Run the docker ps command again to verify that it's no longer present. Good, but what about the nginx image that was downloaded at first? We're not using that anymore. So how do we get rid of that image? But first, how do we see a list of images present on our host? Run the docker images command to see a list of available images and their sizes. On our host, we have 4 images: nginx, redis, ubuntu, and alpine. We will talk about tags later in this course when we discuss about images. To remove an image that you no longer plan to use, run the docker rmi command. Remember, you must ensure that no containers are running off of that image before attempting to remove the image. You must stop and delete all dependent containers to be able to delete an image. When we ran the docker run command earlier, it downloaded the Ubuntu image as it couldn't find one locally. What if we simply want to download the image and keep so when we run the docker run command, we don't want to wait for it to download? Use the docker pull command to only pull the image and not run the container. So in this case, the docker pull ubuntu command pulls the Ubuntu image and stores it on our host. Let's look at another example. Say you were to run a Docker container from an Ubuntu image. When you run the docker run ubuntu command, it runs an instance of Ubuntu image and exits immediately. If you were to list the running containers, you wouldn't see the container running. If you list all containers, including those that are stopped, you will see that the new container you ran is in an exited state. Now, why is that? Unlike virtual machines, containers are not meant to host an operating system. Containers are meant to run a specific task or process, such as to host an instance of a web server or application server or a database, or simply to carry some kind of computation or analysis task. Once the task is complete, the container exits. A container only lives as long as the process inside it is alive. If the web service inside the container is stopped or crashed, then the container exits. This is why when you run a container from an Ubuntu image, it stops immediately. Because Ubuntu is just an image of an operating system that is used as the base image for other applications. There is no process or application running in it by default. If the image isn't running any service, as is the case with Ubuntu, you could instruct Docker to run a process with the docker run command. For example, a sleep command with a duration of 5 seconds. When the container starts, it runs the sleep command and goes into sleep for 5 seconds, post which the sleep command exits and the container stops. What we just saw was executing a command when we run the container. But what if we would like to execute a command on a running container? For example, when I run the docker ps command, I can see that there is a running container which uses the Ubuntu image and sleeps for 100